Thor, son of Odin and the earth goddess Jr., was the most beloved of the Norse gods. Where Odin ruled with wisdom and cunning, Thor ruled with strength, loyalty, and thunder. His voice was the storm, his eyes the flash of lightning, and his mighty hammer Mjolnir the strike that shattered mountains and the skulls of giants alike. He was often depicted as a red-bearded giant of a god, broad-shouldered and loud, not subtle like his father but direct, like a hammer itself. He wore the belt Megingjur, which doubled his already unmatched power, and iron gloves to wield Mjolnir. His chariot was drawn across the sky by two goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjastr, whose hooves caused thunder. Uniquely, the goats could be slaughtered for food, and so long as their bones were unbroken, Thor could resurrect them each dawn. Thor's might was not limited to destruction. Mjolnir consecrated marriages, blessed the dead, and defended humankind. Farmers prayed to him for fertile fields, sailors sought his favor before voyages, and warriors carried small hammer amulets into battle. Archaeological finds across Scandinavia show just how deeply Thor was revered, sometimes more than Odin himself. Unlike Odin, Thor was not aloof. He was a god of the people, honest, hot-tempered, quick to laughter, but relentless against his enemies. The giants, the Jotnar, were his eternal foes, beings of chaos who sought to unmake the order of the world. Yet Thor was their bulwark, the thunder that stood between gods and mortals and the abyss of destruction. But Thor was not flawless. He was straightforward to a fault, easily angered, sometimes mocked by tricksters like Loki or deceived by giants. Yet these flaws made him more beloved. He was not a distant, perfect god, but one who seemed close to those who prayed to him, struggling, fighting, sometimes failing, yet never abandoning his duty. In the end, Thor's destiny was bound to the greatest of all monsters, Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. Though prophecy said both would fall at Ragnarok, Thor's courage was not diminished. His life was a ceaseless struggle, his hammer blows the heartbeat of resistance against chaos. Even after the gods fell, his sons Magni and Modi would inherit Mjolnir, carrying his strength into the new world. To the Norse people, Thor was more than thunder, he was protection, fertility, and the promise that even in the storm's fury, there was order and defense. Every rumble in the sky reminded them, Thor rides again. Trouble in Asgard often began with Loki, and this tale was no different. One day, the trickster crept upon Sif, Thor's wife, while she slept. Sif's hair was her glory, golden as a field of ripe wheat, shining in the sun. With mischief in his heart, Loki drew a blade and sheared it away. When Sif awoke bald, her wail echoed through the halls of the gods. Thor's wrath was immediate. His red beard bristled, his eyes sparked, and his great hands closed around Loki's throat. "Restore her beauty," Thor thundered, "or I'll break every bone in your body." Loki, gasping, promised to make amends. He fled to Svartalfheim, home of the dwarves, the greatest smiths of all the 9 realms. To the sons of Ivaldi he went, begging them to forge hair of real gold that would grow as naturally as Sif's own. They agreed, and while their hammers rang, they also forged treasures. Skidbladnir, a ship that could be folded like cloth but would always catch the best wind, and Gungnir, a spear that would never miss. But Loki's tongue could not stay silent. He boasted before another pair of dwarves, Sindri and Brock, that none could rival the sons of Ivaldi. Offended, the brothers wagered they could craft even greater wonders, staking Loki's head as the prize. The trickster agreed, already plotting. Sindri worked the forge while Brock pumped the bellows. To sabotage them, Loki transformed into a biting fly. When Sindri placed pigskin into the forge, Loki stung Brock's hand. Though blood dripped, Brock did not falter, and from the flames came Gullinbursti, a boar with golden bristles that glowed in the dark. Next, Sindri laid gold in the fire. Loki bit Brock's neck, deeper this time, but still he endured, and from the flames came Draupnir, a golden ring that dripped 8 new rings every 9th night. Finally, Sindri placed iron in the forge. Loki stung Brock's eyelid so viciously that blood blinded him, and for a heartbeat the bellows paused. From the fire emerged a hammer, mighty, unbreakable, but with a handle shorter than intended. It was Mjolnir. The gods gathered to judge the treasures. Odin received Gungnir and Draupnir, Freyr received Skidbladnir and Gullinbursti, and Sif was crowned with her shining golden hair. But all agreed, the hammer Mjolnir, though flawed, was the greatest gift, for it alone could defend Asgard against the giants. Sindri and Brock demanded Loki's head, but the trickster wriggled free, arguing they could not take it without also harming his neck, which was not part of the bargain. Enraged, Brock sewed Loki's lips shut to silence his lies. Thus Mjolnir came into Thor's hands, the hammer of thunder, the weapon of storms, the bane of giants. And from that day forward, whenever lightning split the sky, mortals knew Thor's hammer had struck. Thor was restless. Storms rumbled in his blood, and the walls of Asgard felt too small for his strength. So he set out for Jotunheim, the land of giants, taking with him the trickster Loki and 2 human children, Thjalfi and Roskva, who had sworn to serve him after learning the magic of his goats. On their way, night fell, and they sought shelter in what seemed a cavernous hall. As dawn broke, the ground shook and the hall moved. To their astonishment, they discovered it was no hall at all but the glove of a giant, vast enough for them to sleep in its thumb. The giant's name was Skrymir, and though friendly, his size made even Thor uneasy. Skrymir offered to carry their food in a great sack tied with unyielding knots. That night, when hunger pressed, Thor tried to untie it, pulling until his hands bled, yet the sack would not open. Furious, Thor seized Mjolnir and struck Skrymir's head. The giant stirred and muttered, "Was that a leaf?" Twice more Thor struck in rage, and twice Skrymir only brushed his brow as if a twig had touched him. Thor's fury boiled, but the giant merely chuckled and left them in the morning. At last, they reached the fortress of Tgar-Loki, king of the giants. The hall was immense, its doors so high Thor and his companions seemed like children. The king welcomed them with mocking words, "Here none enter without proving their worth. Let us see what you can do." First came Loki's trial, a contest of eating. He faced a giant named Loki, and both were given a trough of meat. Loki devoured flesh and bone with speed, but Loki devoured everything, the meat, the bones, and even the trough itself. Loki was defeated. Next came Thjalfi, swiftest of mortals. He raced against Hugi, who was thought itself made flesh. Thjalfi ran with all his might, but Hugi always reached the finish line first. Now it was Thor's turn. He was given a horn to drink from. "Many here empty it in a single draught," said Tgar-Loki. Thor raised it and drank so deeply the hull trembled, but when he lowered it, the horn seemed barely less full. Twice more he tried, yet he could not finish it. Then he was challenged to lift a simple cat from the ground. Thor grasped it and strained with all his might, but only one paw lifted. Laughter shook the hall. Last, Thor demanded combat. He was pitted against an old woman named Ellie, bent and frail. Certain of victory, Thor grappled her, but the longer he fought, the weaker he grew. At last, she forced him to one knee, and the giants jeered. Humiliated, Thor left at dawn. But once beyond the walls, Tgar-Loki revealed the truth. None of the contests were as they appeared. Loki had faced wildfire itself. Thjalfi had raced against Thor. The horn Thor drank from was connected to the sea, his gulps had lowered it, creating the tides. The cat was the Midgard serpent, so vast it encircled the earth, and Ellie was old age, which no one can overcome. Not all of Thor's battles were fought on land. Some drew him across the seas, into the realm where the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, lurked beneath the waves. The tale begins when Thor visited the giant Hymir, known for his strength and grim temper. Hymir lived on the edge of the world, where the ocean stretched to infinity. Thor, never one to hide his nature, demanded food and drink. Hymir grudgingly slaughtered 3 of his mighty bulls for a feast, but his sour face darkened further when Thor announced he wished to join him at sea to fish. The giant scoffed. "No boat can bear your weight, Thunderer. And if it could, you'd be too weak for the oars. Thor's laughter boomed like a storm. I will row as no man has rowed before. Hymir agreed but set a cruel trap. He told Thor to find bait. Striding into the fields, Thor seized Hymir's largest bull by the horns, tore off its head with one wrench, and carried it back. Hymir, fuming, had no choice but to take him aboard. Out on the waves, Hymir rowed to his usual grounds. But Thor urged him farther, into deeper waters, where the sea swelled dark and endless. Fear flickered in Hymir's eyes. This is folly. Out here swims Jormungand, the world serpent, whose coils encircle Midgard itself. We should not go farther. Thor only grinned. He baited his hook with the bull's bloody head and cast it into the abyss. Down it sank, deeper than any net had reached, until at last it brushed against the scales of the Midgard serpent. The monster stirred. Its eyes opened like green suns in the darkness, and it struck, swallowing the bait. Thor's arms tensed, muscles straining, as he pulled with all his might. The sea heaved, storms rose, and lightning cracked as god and serpent struggled. Slowly, Jormungand rose, its body coiling up from the depths, vast beyond measure. Its jaws gaped, dripping venom, and its eyes locked with Thor's in eternal hatred. Thor planted his feet, veins bulging, his hands like iron on the line. With one heaved pull, he drew the serpent's head above the waves. Foam and poison frothed around the boat, and Thor reached for Mjolnir to strike the killing blow. But Hymir, terrified beyond reason, slashed the line. With a thunderous crash, the serpent sank back into the abyss, and the sea grew calm again, though Thor's fury was anything but calm. His hammer shook in his grip, longing to crush the serpent's skull. Enraged, Thor turned on Hymir, his eyes blazing. Yet the moment was lost. Jormungand had returned to the deep. Thor struck the giant instead, and with that the boat sped back to shore. Though he had not slain the serpent, mortals whispered that the sea still remembers that day, when thunder and snake nearly ended the world before its time. For it was prophesied that Thor and Jormungand would meet again at Ragnarok, and there, at last, their struggle would be finished. The doom of the gods had long been foretold. Ragnarok, the twilight of all things, would come when the bonds of fate broke. Wolves would devour the sun and moon, fire would sweep across the sky, and the seas would churn as giants and monsters rose for the final war. Thor knew his role, and he bore it not with fear, but with grim resolve. When the horn of Heimdall, Gjallarhorn, sounded across the 9 realms, Thor rose. Lightning split the heavens, and thunder rolled as he girded himself with his belt Megingjur, fastened his iron gloves, and took Mjolnir in hand. At his side marched his sons, Magni and Modi, ready to inherit his strength if fate allowed. The giants stormed from Jotunheim, led by their king, while Loki, long unmasked as traitor, sailed in from the sea with the ship Naglfar, its hull made from the nails of the dead. But greater than any giant or god loomed the Midgard serpent, Jormungand, rising from the ocean depths. Waves crashed upon the land as its coils encircled the world, venom spilling from its jaws, poisoning sea and sky alike. Thor advanced to meet it. No other god could stand against such a foe. The ground shook with each of his strides, and the storm raged with him, for thunder and serpent were bound by destiny. When they clashed, the sound was the breaking of mountains. Thor swung Mjolnir, shattering scale and bone, while Jormungand lashed with coils thick as towers, its fangs dripping poison. The sea boiled, the air burned, and the sky itself seemed to fall as they fought. With each strike of the hammer, lightning burst forth, blinding gods and giants alike. Thor's arms bled, his breath came ragged, yet still he pressed on, unyielding. At last, with a final roar that shook the 9 realms, he crushed the serpent's skull beneath Mjolnir. The Midgard serpent writhed, its death throes splitting earth and sea, until it lay still at last. But prophecy could not be denied. Thor staggered back, triumphant yet doomed. The serpent's venom had filled the air, seeping into his lungs and veins. With only 9 steps, he stumbled across the battlefield, each stride shaking the ground. Then the thunderer fell, the hammer slipping from his grasp, and the storm grew silent. Though Thor perished, his sacrifice was not in vain. The giants fell, Loki was slain, and though many gods perished, the world was not destroyed forever. From the ashes of Ragnarok, a new world would rise, green and pure. Thor's sons, Magni and Modi, would find Mjolnir among the ruins and carry their father's legacy into the dawn of renewal. So ended Thor, the defender of gods and men, the breaker of giants, the thunder in the sky. His life was a storm, his death a sacrifice, and his memory endured wherever thunder rolled. For even when the world was remade, the sound of the storm still whispered his name.